Baron von Steuben from Prussia played an important part in the American Revolution. Before he came to help train the American army, the Americans were just used to fighting in the woods like Indians. If an officer tried to get them to march in formation, they would go off in every which way, bumping and tripping over their own muskets. They even went into battle marching single file because they didn't know how to march four across like the English, and that always slowed them down. That all changed because one day, a short, stocky fellow who called himself Baron von Steuben showed up at General Washington's headquarters. He was wearing a uniform from Prussia, fancier than that of General Washington himself, and he had a huge medal around his neck, as big as a cannonball. Now, I guess that's what kept him so short. The weight of all those medals would stun anybody's growth. Von Steuben told Washington that he'd fought in wars all over Europe and he could teach his soldiers the basic things to know to make their army a more effective fighting force. Well, Washington was suspicious of such claims, but decided to give him a chance with his soldiers camped at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, the winter of 1776. Von Steuben started with only 100 soldiers from Washington's guard, and he began to train them to march in formation. He would jump up and down and shout in German till his face was as red as a beet. The rest of the soldiers not training sure thought this was a funny picture, to see all the American soldiers getting their orders mixed up and von Steuben running around wild-eyed, looking more like a half-crazy madman. But he turned out to be one crackerjack of a teacher. Pretty soon, he had the men marching around camp just perfect. Then everyone wanted to know how to march like that, and before long, the whole company started looking like a real spit-and-polish troop. They could now hold their heads up high. Yes, sir, von Steuben even helped the Americans with their bayonets. Before he came, they used their bayonets to roast meats or as candle holders, but he showed them the real value of a bayonet when used the proper way. He had them practicing bayoneting on dummies till they were expert. They couldn't wait to try them out, too. Then he showed them a thing or two about muskets, a way of keeping an extra ball in their mouth and then spitting the ball into their hand quick as greased lightning in order to get out an extra shot while the fellows who were using the old system were still loading. Von Steuben even got them showing up in time for troop inspection. He made the soldiers set their pocket watches by Washington's watch at headquarters. Now, the men stood straight as trees, and their lines were even as a picket fence, while von Steuben and the other officers walked in front inspecting them. Before long, the soldiers did such a good job of marching that even the farmers came out to watch them. Von Steuben made up a drill book which Washington made the official guide for all the American soldiers. It was sure a funny sight, seeing the officers giving the men instructions from a book they themselves hardly understood. When the time finally came, Washington was ready to attack the British. The troops were so well drilled and trained, they were ready for anything the British could throw at them. Washington was so impressed with what Baron von Steuben did with his raggedy, motley army that he promoted von Steuben to Inspector General and Drill Master of all the American soldiers. The Bible tells us, as Christians, to keep ourselves in training for godly life. Physical training has some value, but spiritual training is valuable in every way. It promises us life both now and in the future. 1 Timothy 4:7 and 8. If soldiers train so hard to keep alive and fight effective, how much more should we as Christians also train ourselves to prepare ourselves for the battle of life? Our battle, the Bible tells us, is with the world, the flesh, and the devil. Why don't you take some time out now to talk or think about how to train yourself for the battles that you might face in the future?